Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening to this workshop on financing home energy improvements. And we're trying to answer the question, you know, you're putting in a new efficient furnace or whether you're doing a weatherization project or putting in insulation, how do you pay for it? So hopefully tonight when you leave, you'll have a better idea of how to do that. My name is pcameron, and I'm the director of Brattleboro Climate Protection. And I want to thank our co-sponsors for tonight's workshop. And those include the Brattleboro Energy Committee, Sustainable Energy Outreach Network, Efficiency Vermont, Sustainable Energy Resource Group, and Home Energy Advocates. And just want to briefly go through the agenda for tonight. We're going to start off with a talk by Mark Kelly from Efficiency Vermont on the Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE program, and the Heat Saver Loan Program, both of those through Efficiency Vermont. Then Bruce Whitney from the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust is going to say a few words about the Housing Trust's Home Repair Loan Program. And then Bob Walker from Sustainable Energy Resource Group will give an overview of energy improvements that can be financed with these tools. And then we'll have a discussion period and we'll wrap up by 7:30. So before we get started with the talk, since we have so few people, why don't we go around, and if you could just say your name, what town you're from, and if you're a homeowner, if you're representing a business, or if you're a contractor. We'll start right here.
Maybe if you have an energy project you're thinking about doing or something like that too.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Frank Lyons. I'm a relatively new resident of Brattleboro. We bought a house here last July. The house I moved from in New Jersey, I had solar panels on it and loved them. Didn't pay an electric bill for 8 years that I was there. So I'm looking to put solar into the house. You know, finances, you know, there's a lot that I have to spend money on in the house, and so I just want to find out how to finance it. So next.
Hi, I'm Cody Berwick. I'm also relatively new to the Brattleboro area, not new to Vermont, and I'm here representing both myself and Solaflect Energy. Based in Norwich, Vermont, we sell the solar PV trackers.
All right. My name is Bruce Whitney. I'll be talking a little bit later about my organization, Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust Home Repair Program. As a homeowner, I've done a deep energy retrofit. I've installed solar panels, and I am going to be applying for a heat saver loan soon to install a cold climate heat pump. So I'm an experienced user as well as an experienced pusher. So of the good things.
And a good marketer. And I'm Alice Mays. I'm a landlady. And I'm in over my head on a renovation project. It's a three-family, three-unit home. And I needed to add a window to a two-bedroom apartment. Found out that there was no insulation at all, and that the rest of the insulation was fiberglass, which is very good at keeping the dust out of the air. But insulation, I don't think so. So I've installed the foam, I've installed plasterboard and plaster, and I'm all but out of money. So there's a way to go. Thank you.
I'm Mike Elliott. I'm also a resident of Brattleboro, and I also work for a company called Builders Installed Products, which is a insulation subcontractor. We also do energy audits. And I'm here to learn more about the Heat Saver Loan because we'll be offering it, and I may be participating in it myself because I'm planning to replace a heating system at my house. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Stan Franklin. Live in Brattleboro. We're looking to replace some windows and maybe a heating system.
Holly Franklin. I'm with him. My name is Carol Ann Johnson. I live in Marlboro. We've already done a lot of energy improvements, but always looking to do more and have a couple installation projects. I want to look into, I don't know what it's called, insulating from the outside in with some kind of new kind of siding. And I also have an idea for dividing some of our land and creating an energy company to have solar panels, solar energy units on that land, and want to talk to someone about how to get that going.
My name is Jason Cooper. I'm on the Town Energy Committee. I also am a property manager and have several buildings. We've been working for years to improve the energy efficiency of them, and there are many miles to go. I've put in a couple of heat pumps. I have a solar field and a rooftop solar. I'd be interested in putting in more of each of those.
I'm Guy Payne with the Sustainable Energy Outreach Network, but I do have a 175-year-old house up in Saxons River, and you name the project and I need to work on it. So looking for the financing options.
Tad Montgomery. I am the sole proprietor of Home Energy Advocates. That's my collection of things back there in the corner. I am on the Town Energy Committee. I think 4 or 5 subcommittees have been working on the pace to bring it here to Brattleboro for 4 or 5 years. It's been quite a slog. We offer discounted home energy audits, full audit for homeowners for $100. Happy to talk with folks about that who are interested. Also do a lot of work with solar and alternative heating systems and just helping homeowners to think through major energy retrofits. That's the main thing that we do.
And you provide pizza too.
And occasionally I provide pizza, yeah. And get caught in the rain.
Me too.
My name is Junio Anthes Moody. I work for Farnham Insulators and live here in Brattleboro. We do a lot of, we're also part of the Efficiency Excellence Network, which is one of these loans, and have a house that we worked on. My house, we started out using about 800 gallons a year when we didn't live in it full time, and now we use less than 300. So.
I'm Mark Kelly with Efficiency Vermont, and I live in Grand Isle, actually. I'm here to talk about the financing, but I'm also a homeowner, and just last week completed my home performance with Energy Star project, so I'm looking to do more stuff, heat pumps and that sort of thing in the future too.
And I'm Bob Walker. I'm Director of Sustainable Energy Resource Group, and going to be talking as well about some of the different energy programs that you can use these various financing mechanisms with. We built a house, moved in about 20 years ago, and it's pretty low energy use. It's got a double stud wall, and we use about 2,000 square feet. We use about 1.5 cords of wood to heat with, and about 70 gallons of propane for cooking and backup heat when we're gone in the winter, and that's about it, I guess. Drying, I guess we use it for drying occasionally too.
Nice footprint.
All right, thanks everyone. And we really appreciate BCTV being here today to film this forum for cable access. And Andre, thank you for being here on such short notice. So our first speaker is Mark Kelly. Mark is the financing program manager at the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, and he's come all the way from Burlington, I think, to speak.
So thank you for coming. And again, I work for Efficiency Vermont and Vermont Energy Investment Corporation in Burlington, but we serve the whole entire state, and we really like to get out as much as we can. And so what we're going to talk about today are the kind of couple programs, as I mentioned, PACE as well as the Heat Saver program, which are 2 unique programs that are in addition to the more traditional ways you might be able to pay for these things, which would be through banks or credit unions, essentially either a personal loan or some form of tapping into home equity, there's a few different variations of that. Most people are pretty familiar with those. I'd be happy to go through those at the end if anybody has questions about how those work, but we're really going to focus on PACE and the Heat Saver program today. So, so the first thing is, the best thing to do is pay for it with a zero or low interest loan if you can, because obviously we want to get those energy savings and keep the cost of the project as low as possible, and interest does cost money. So we have, first thing is kinds of things you might do is Bob's going to talk about all that in his portion of the presentation, but we have pretty much the whole gamut. We have all the thermal things you can do, which is tightening up your shell, better insulation, things like heating systems, cold climate heat pumps, those sorts of things, heat pump water heaters, et cetera. And then we've also got the renewables, the solar PV, solar hot water, biomass, even small scale wind or micro hydro. Okay. So one of the big things is that saving more money on your monthly utility bills than you pay in the financing during the period of time that you're doing the financing is really important for a lot of people. Not everyone. Some people, it's kind of like buying a car too, right? Some people just want to take the shortest loan they can because they can afford to and pay it off as quickly as they can, keep the interest as minimal as they can. That's one method. But for a lot of people, it's really more about their monthly cash flow, and they'd like to actually have more money in their pocket once their project is complete than less money in their pocket. So what we try to do is work with people to structure it, if that's important to them, so that they have what we call positive cash flow each month. So we'll get into that in a minute. And then, so we're a great resource for people. We have a website it's a good starting point. There's a lot of information. We're going to be redoing that, and the new website will be out at the end of the year. So it'll be a little easier to navigate. There's probably, if anything, too much information there right now. We have a great customer support team, and their phone number is also on all of our literature in the back. But they're trained people, and for example, one of the residential guys whose name is Matt, you might have seen him in the commercials. He's BPI certified. He's done heating systems and the different weatherization work, so he knows what's going on, and he's really good. So, and it's all free, so feel free to just take advantage of that if you can. All right. So we can help you pay for your project, and we want to do that. So for homeowners, we have two programs. The Heat Saver Loan Program, which is fairly new. We rolled it out in October as sort of a pilot for just heating system upgrades, and then in March we added a bunch of additional measures, which we'll get into. And then we have Property Assessed Clean Energy, which the acronym spells PACE, and that's available now in Brattleboro, which is fantastic. It's available in a lot of the Upper Valley towns. We have a list on our website of all the towns. Right now there's 35 where it's available. Middlebury's coming on board, and then we're working on getting as many more as we can actually as well, so that the more it spreads around the state, the more we'll see people using it as well. And it's a good tool. So we want to have as many tools in our toolbox as we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to mention that in addition to Brattleboro and Windham County, Putney, Marlboro, and Manchester, which is in Bennington County, all have PACE. And
Right.
there's several other towns that are in that process of adopting it.
Right, that's great. And also, we're here to, I'm here to help anybody who wants to help their town along, whether that's, there's two processes. First, the voters need to vote in favor of it, and then the second part is, once that's done, the select board needs to actually go ahead and do what they call adopt the program, which is sign all the paperwork, essentially. And I'm here to help anybody through that, help their town, help the energy committee, whatever it is. So again, feel free to call us, and we can really work on that. And we've made some great changes to the program since around last September or so, I think is when we started doing them. And we've made some concessions and looked at the way it was originally set up and made changes to some of the structure for the language that the towns use, which makes it a little more amenable. That's kind of what helped us with Brattleboro. So now we can apply that to other towns. So I think it'll be a lot easier than it might have been, say, a year ago to do that. Okay, so we also have, just want to make sure I mentioned, we serve the whole state, and we serve all electric ratepayers. We are actually Efficiency Vermont is a regulated utility. And so we have products, we have loan products as well as all of our energy services for businesses. We have 2 there as well, which I'm not going to really go into tonight because it's residential focused, but I did bring some information. I can always talk one-on-one afterwards. And then we also have an agriculture program. So we have a loan program for farmers. There's a lot of ways farmers can borrow money, but we also have one in case those other methods don't work for them. Okay. So we can go to the next page. So one of the big things is when you're doing efficiency in your home or business or whatever it might be, it's that money you're spending on efficiency, we believe truly that that is an investment. It's not a cost. It's not something that you spend it once and it's gone. This is investment, meaning it's going to have future payback, which is very important for people to look at. So we can go to the next. So basically, the definition of to invest is to commit money in order to gain a financial return. And with these efficiency or renewable, like solar things, if done right, and if you're doing the right work on your house and it applies well, it's going to definitely pay back quite a bit more than what you put into it. Okay. And to spend, obviously, is just to use up or pay out, and it's done. So your fuel bill every month, that's just spent, right? It's like you're going to get another one next month and another one the month after that, and it's just sort of, but the efficiency side, you get down to like what Bob was talking about, where it's a quart and a half of wood and $70 of propane for a 2,000 square foot house. That's pretty good. So I'm betting the return you got on the money you put in is pretty impressive if you've been tracking it. Okay. And I always encourage people to look at not just the payback period, meaning like the number of months or years it takes to get the money you put into the project paid back through the energy savings, but also to look at the return on investment, because you'll find that even with, say, a 10-year payback, which is typical for a lot of like the home performance jobs where you're doing all the air sealing insulation, you'll see that a 10-year payback is typically around a 12% return on investment annually, which is really pretty darn good, especially compared to like a savings account nowadays, where you get like 0.2% or some really minuscule amount. And it's a really safe investment because it's investing in your home as opposed to, say, the stock market, where you might do better than 12%, but you might do negative 12% or something to that effect certain years as well. So we think it's just a fantastic way for people to really kind of actually improve their own personal wealth a little bit too, through a really safe investment. Okay. So we can go to the next slide. So that's what I was just saying, the ROI versus payback. So, and the payback obviously is the time needed to generate the savings equal to the initial investment plus all the costs, right? So the interest, any fees, all that stuff. So you want to really check it all out. Make sure you know exactly how much things are costing. Especially with mortgages and stuff, sometimes people say, well, I can refinance and interest rate's a little bit lower, so I'll do that. Well, but then if you do, the title search and the other things that go along with that, the appraisal and things, those fees can really add up, and by the time you're done with it, a typical mortgage refinance can easily be over $1,000 in fees, sometimes as high as like $2,500. So you need to really factor all those things in when you're weighing these options out. Okay. And again, I feel that ROI is a better measure, and most energy retrofits, depending on what they are, some are really high, they're up near 20%, but most are somewhere in that 10 to 20% range. Okay. So, and the most expensive option is to do nothing. So we can move forward. We can keep moving forward a little bit. So I think I already touched on this pretty well. But typically for a lot of the customers we work with, the total cost is less important than that monthly outlay of money. But again, we're here to make it work for whatever your needs are. So everybody's different. If you want to do it as short as possible and just keep the interest as low as possible, and you're willing to take that bigger payment for a short period of time, great. That's totally fine. Okay. And then longer term financing, what that does is aligns obviously the payment to the savings, so that we try to smooth that out more. And if we go to the next slide, I've got a couple graphs. We can kind of bring those in. So this is an 8-year loan for it's a typical project. This was a real project actually that somebody did at their house, and we modeled it out, and for 8 years, your annual costs are up here, right? Your savings are down here. So once you pay it off, it's nice. But when you do it for 12 years, now your annual costs are the lower bar, right? And your savings are the high bar. So for this customer, that worked out much better for them. So we were able to set that up like that for them.
Mark, could you describe what was involved with that particular project?
Yeah, I believe it was a home performance project. So they were doing the air sealing, the insulating, all that stuff. And they were looking at bank financing and that kind of thing. And they were really not, so the proposals they got from their banks and stuff, it was going to be hard to go beyond 8 years for this particular couple because they were doing, I believe, like a personal, like a term loan. And they didn't really have the equity to do. But when we looked at the other kind of financing, like the heat saver, where you can go anywhere up to 15 years, right? We were able to structure it like that, and then that worked out really well for them. The interest wasn't bad in terms of the rate they got, so that just, for them, on a monthly, their personal budget, it just worked perfectly. And one thing I should throw in there too is, just backing up a little bit, both when it comes to like Efficiency Vermont and these two programs we have and the business programs and stuff, there's nothing in it for us. We don't get any kind of anything, any percentage or anything like that. So we're not here to sell financing. What we're here to do is we want you guys to do the projects, to do the energy efficiency stuff, but we know that, how do I pay for it? That's one of the biggest hurdles people have, regardless of how much they want to do the work. So that's why we've kind of dipped our feet in the water of financing. But what we try to do is just sort of be that intermediary to work with, like set up these programs, make them available, and then help educate people and help walk them through the process. But we don't get any kind of fee or anything like that. So, but it's good to know. So, all right, we can go to the next one. So this one is, this was the energy cost before the project was $3,104, and this is a deep, I think the top of the
actual zero.
Yeah, I think the top of our slide is over the top of the projector.
Yeah.
So you can't really see the whole slide. But anyhow, so they started off with over $3,000, over $3,100. And after, this is a deep, what this was a zero energy home, which ZEH is the acronym, right? So it's a deep retrofit, which some of you guys are pretty familiar with and have done. So anyways, they brought their energy cost down to $479. The project, though, was pretty expensive because they did a lot of work. So it was a little over $36,000. And they used 15-year financing. And so this is like the yearly effect. And this is, so you can see though, at first it's a little more, and they were willing to do that, but then the lines crossed, and it got, even with the financing, they were better off, and then their loan got paid off, and all of a sudden they're down here. Whereas if they hadn't done anything, but that same period of time, they're way up here. And in a lot of cases, we're seeing that people are able to time this with things like retirement, which works out really well. All of a sudden you retire, and boom, you're down here. It's perfect. So, big difference. And if you just hit the button, this is cumulative. So that was a 4.99 scenario, right? 3-year, we assumed a 3-year annual rise in energy cost, or 3% rise per year. Right? You know, you can argue it might be less, might be more, but 3 is pretty safe. But anyways, so the cumulative effect is 69,000 versus 113,000. So they've got, what, 44,000 or so extra in the bank after that amount of time. Now I said 25 years, but still, who doesn't want to have an extra $44,000 in the bank? So, okay. So PACE, we can move on to the next slide. So PACE provides, there is a minimum with PACE, and that minimum is $3,500, and you can go up to $30,000. And anything in between. And one nice thing about PACE is you can do both efficiency and renewables. So you can do PV, you can do wind, you can do small residential hydro. You can do a EV charging station for an electric vehicle, class 1 or 2 charging stations. So lots of stuff plus all the efficiency stuff. And we have a whole list of everything on our website. And I'm in the process of starting to incorporate some things that Efficiency Vermont really doesn't have programs for, like some of the, I forget what the latest one was. It was a heating system, but it was like a non-traditional. I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what the technology was, but it'll come back to me. But anyways, it's a really good technology, but it's very expensive. But we're going to allow that too because it fits in. It's just we don't have a program around it specifically. So the interest for a lot of Vermonters on the efficiency work can be 0 to 1.99. We have something in between there which is 0.99. So it's 0, 0.99, and 1.99, which is very good. And that's up to the first $15,000 of the project cost. but only on the efficiency, unfortunately. And the reason it's not on the renewables is just the source of the money came from the ARA Act, and that money was earmarked that it could only be used for efficiency type work, thermal, they like to call it thermal efficiency, and not for renewables, because if not, I would make it available for all of it. And you can go up to 20 years, which can really keep your payments low, but you can choose 10 years or 15 or 20. So there's 3 options. And you can pay off PACE financing in part or in full anytime. There's no penalty. It's very flexible that way. We do a free analysis of each project to determine the cost effectiveness. Doesn't mean we're going to say you can't do it. It's just we want to help you understand exactly where you fall financially with that project. And it gives the person a little more information. And a lot of times too, we encourage people to look at not doing just the low-hanging fruit, but trying to look at kind of the more holistic. And I'm sure Tad can kind of relate to this, and Bob nodding his head yes. But because if you bundle the work together, and you get the really like slam dunk stuff that has like a really great payback, along with some of the deeper retrofit stuff that has the longer payback, but you do it all together, it works. But if you do the slam dunk stuff, of course, that's real easy. But then a couple years down the road, you look at that other stuff, and the financial picture of that could be, like 30-year payback type stuff, and then people tend not to do it. So it's good to kind of bundle it. And I learned just recently, I went to there's an annual big financing forum every year they just went to with experts from all around the country, and PACE interest can be tax deductible, which sounds funny. Well, it's like, what do you mean it can? The reason we don't, the thing is, there's only 5 states that have residential PACE right now, so the IRS hasn't actually come out and written something that says, it is. But any kind of interest on a mortgage or like a lien or any other kinds of liens, if you're paying interest, it is. So most of the tax attorneys and CPAs, like in California and other states where they're doing thousands and thousands of PACE assessments each year, are taking that as a deduction for their clients, and they're getting a statement from the PACE provider at the end of the year that shows the amount of interest paid during the year, and they use that as backup. So I just want to get that out there for Vermonters, that they should, if they're doing PACE, and especially if they're using a professional to do their tax returns, they should talk to them about that and see if they can deduct that. I think they can, and I think it's worth trying. They'll usually tell you to push the limits a little bit anyways. So, yep.
Mark, what are the other states?
Oh, geez. California, Colorado, Maine, Vermont, that's 4, and Texas? Might be Texas. Yeah, Austin, Texas, I know has a program. Yep. Yeah. So, okay. So other PACE benefits. Was one of the changes we made last fall. You can get 50% of the money of the project cost right up front to pay your contractor, because it had originally was set up originally so that you had to wait until all the work was completely done, and there had to be a form filled out to certify that. Then you could get the money to pay your contractor. Well, that wasn't working too well for a lot of Vermont contractors, because some of these projects can take months, right? And so who's got the money to, these small sole proprietors especially, having to pay labor and materials up front? Not a good thing. So we made it so they can take 50% up front, which is nice. It's really minimal closing costs. No down payment required. You're totally welcome to, if you want to put some equity in, that's great, but there's none required. There is a 2% of the cost of the project that you're financing. There's a 2% loan loss reserve contribution, so that would be, a cost to consider, but it's not bad. I mean, 2% is pretty minimal, and that goes to a loan loss reserve fund that is a revolving fund, and it'll grow over time. We've had no write-offs yet, so nothing's been drawn out of the fund. It's meant to be self-sustainable that way.
So
and
the homeowner pays an additional 2%?
They pay the 2%. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, but there are no other real closing costs with PACE. So there was a $50 fee to do the cash flow assessment, right? The project cash flow assessment. That was another change last fall. We just scrapped that. We just said, get rid of it. We don't need to charge people $50 to find out how their project looks financially. And then there was a $350 application fee charged by the processor, which is Opportunities Credit Union. that does all the underwriting and does all the monthly billing and stuff. So we've waived that for basically for 2015, and then we're going to look at it going forward, but I'd like to continue waiving it, or at least waiving the majority of it beyond that. It does cost them money to process the applications and do all the underwriting, that kind of thing. But right now we're trying to make the entry to PACE as low cost and affordable as possible. So.
How much of these financing numbers are income-based?
That's a good question. We'll get to that in a minute as far as underwriting and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and one of the key things about PACE that's really nice is that because it's an assessment on your home, and it's really, the money is really being lent to the assessment is attached to the home, not the borrower, not the person. So if you sell your home, you have the option of having that transfer with the property to the next customer who's going to, or next homeowner, I'm sorry, who will then benefit from the work you did, like the solar panels, all the good work you've done. So that's kind of the idea, is to transfer the payments with the energy savings, because nowadays people don't tend to live in their homes a long time, right? They move, they retire, their family grows, whatever it is. So that's a really good feature of PACE. But you can pay it off. So you don't have to have it transfer. So that's great. And so it's very flexible, right? There's no penalty for that. And the other thing is, a PACE assessment does not count against you if you want to go and do a refinance of your mortgage, or if you have a second mortgage, you want to just refinance the two together. You can also then refinance your PACE if you want to do that, but it doesn't count against you as loan to value. It's not considered a loan. So it gives you a little more flexibility than a second mortgage does in that regard as well.
Mark, going back to the 2%, so that's 2% of the cost of the project? Is that...
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're doing, a $10,000 project, right, it'd be 2% of that. Yeah. So $200 bucks.
Borrowing? I mean, what if it's a $10,000 project and you have $2,000 in cash lying around and you only want to borrow $8,000? Right, it'd
be 2% of the 8. Yeah, it's 2% of what you're borrowing for the project. Thank you. That's a great point. And so the qualifications, there's a few, and I can provide a document to anybody who wants. The Vermont Department of Financial Regulation actually set up what all those criteria are, and after the legislature passed PACE, and when we've got like a PDF document, I could email it to anybody who wants it, that goes right through it all. But the big things are we look at the loan to value, so meaning your first and any second mortgages to the value of the home, it can't exceed 90%. And then your debt to income ratio has to be at 41% or less. So those are the two big ones. And pretty much after that, they don't really it's not based on your income, it's not based on any of that stuff, it's not really based on your credit score. They'll run the credit report to get a lot of the information they need about debt to income. You can't, and then there's some other things, like you can't be late on your property tax or any municipal, like sewer payments, that kind of thing. It can't be, the property can't be involved in like a judgment. Can't be in a pending divorce or legal proceeding, that kind of thing. But generally, it's pretty relaxed underwriting. It works really well for self-employed people. It works well for people who've gone through some credit crises. We just had a customer just like that she's a single mom of 4 kids, and she doesn't earn a ton of money. And she had a son who had a really bad medical problem for like almost the whole year, the year prior, so her credit got really shot. And her heating system, which is also her hot water system as well, failed. So she went for the heat saver loan, but because that's more based on your credit score and that stuff, she didn't qualify. So she called me, and we were able to finance her through PACE. So it works.
One more question on the 2%. So that gets rolled into the loan. You don't have to come up with the 2% at closing.
Great question. You don't have to. You can just be rolled into the loan, or you can just pay it at the closing, whichever you prefer. Yep. Great question. All right. So I had mentioned that. Yep. And so these are the interest rates, which are also on the handouts I have in the back. There's a comparison sheet between the PACE and heat saver, and there's the interest rates for both. But basically, as I mentioned, we have 0.99, 1.99, and then there's the kind of like what we call the full rate. And that's set once a month. It's a fixed rate, so once someone walks into it, that's their rate for as long as they keep their PACE assessment. but the rate changes each month. Maybe. We update it each month. It's based on the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston rate, and so it was 6% in May and also in April, and unfortunately it ticked up a little bit for June. Hopefully it'll go back down. And these are the number of people in the household. Right across here we go all the way out to 8 people households, and I don't think it goes up any further than that. And these are the income amounts to qualify for those rates. And again, that's you can apply those lower rates to the first $15,000 of project costs that you're financing, and for the thermal work, but not, unfortunately, not the solar or wind or hydro.
That's adjusted, right? Those are adjusted incomes?
Yeah, it's line 37 of your tax form. And that PDF document that I have that I can send you guys gets into more detail as to everything that the underwriter looks at when they do that. So it's a pretty simple process. It's, you know, the step 5 almost doesn't count because you're going to do that regardless, even if you just pay out of your pocket, right, completing your work. So determine your eligibility, which means if your town has PACE, and then the type of property, which I'll get into in a minute when we do the heat saver because it's the same for both. Find a certified contractor, you know, so you work with your contractor, you identify your project, you get your work scope, all that stuff. Submit that stuff for the project review, which we do with you. That's where we do the cash flow analysis and everything, look at the savings, and then we submit the application, you complete the work. So very simple. Okay. So, any more questions on PACE?
Yeah. I live in Rockingham. We haven't even started the process yet. So what have been the adjustments that have been made from a municipal point of view that has made it possible now for Brattleboro to move forward?
Well, one of the big ones is that, so the way the legislature set up PACE is this, one of the things is there can't be any involuntary liens on the property. So we're not talking about the mortgage liens, because those are voluntary. We're talking about like what they call a mechanics lien, where, you know, you get in a dispute with somebody, maybe they put a deck on your house, you didn't like the work they did, you didn't pay them, or you didn't pay them in full, and they go put a lien on your property. You can't have any of those. But the way the legislature wrote the PACE legislation is to kind of self-certify, so the homeowner says, I have no involuntary liens. But we also have a form that the town, a town representative, could be the town clerk, could be the zoning administrator or town manager, whoever, goes through and they check a box, and then they sign at the bottom. And a lot of the towns are having a hard time with that, because there's some other things too. They just check the address and the name of the, you know, the owner, all that stuff matches. But this no involuntary liens was a stumbling block for a lot of towns, because they're going, oh, you know, we feel like we'd have to do a title search, but the legislature didn't want to mandate title searches because that costs money, right? And they're trying to make this really affordable for people, and it takes time as well. So what we did is we just basically removed that. There's a section up at the top of that form where the homeowner fills out some information, then they sign and date it, and then the town section is below that. So we just moved that no involuntary liens part up to the top section to make it truly completely self-certified. So the homeowner checks it, signs, dates it, then the town just checks that the property is that address, the name is the right name, and that they're not behind on any of their town taxes or sewer, water, that type of thing. And then, so now the town is completely removed from the process. So that worked. That was the biggest one. That was really it.
So what would happen if an applicant checked that box saying that they did not have a lien,
right,
and either through ignorance or not being completely honest, they
That's
actually
a great, yeah. So when they do, when the underwriter, which is Opportunities Credit Union, when they run like the credit reports and the other kind of typical reports that companies or, you know, lenders run when someone's like refinancing a home or whatever, if that lien has been what they call perfected, meaning they could actually enforce it, if the property's sold, they would get paid. It should show up. So we should catch it there too, and then be able to contact the customer and say, oh, excuse me, but, you know, looks like you might have a lien. And they could go back and look at it. If it fell through both those cracks, you know, then it's there. But hopefully it doesn't mean that the person's going to default on their PACE financing. But yeah, so there is a little bit of risk. But I think, you know, I wasn't actually involved with back when the legislation was going through the House and all that and being debated and stuff. But I imagine they probably weighed that and figured, okay, it's going to be all right. You know, we're willing to take a little bit of risk on it. So hasn't happened yet. So we hope it doesn't. So should we move on to the heat saver? And I can answer more PACE questions later on too if anyone thinks of something they haven't thought of yet. So one of the keys here is it's for thermal energy upgrades, and like PACE, it's residential and it's for owner-occupied properties, which is, we'll get into that stuff in a minute, but that's the same for both. Okay, we can move forward a little bit. So what's great about this? Well, first of all, really low interest rates and no down payment. Flexible terms to match your budget, so it can be up to 15 years, which is pretty long. Works for most energy projects, and there's really no, I mean, I guess 3 is what we've published, but I have a feeling if someone really just wanted to do 2 years or something, that the lenders would probably work with them. And it's really easy and fast. These things are getting approved in 2 business days or less in pretty much every case, unless there's some just really strange kind of thing going on with the person's project that we have to kind of look into more. But generally, they're just really easy and fast. And it can be combined with Efficiency Vermont incentives. So it's not like when you go buy a car and you either get the rebate or you get, you know, the, what's the other thing? Lower. Financing. Yeah, right, thank you. Jeez, yeah, low interest financing, right? It's like you usually can't get both on cars, but in this case you can get both. And same with PACE, by the way, too. It's not like we do the one or the other. We want you to get everything that you can take advantage of to make it more affordable. All right, so these are the things, Bob's going to go through and talk about them in detail a little more, but it's home performance with Energy Star, so all your shell measures, weatherization, everything, high performance oil or propane fired heating systems, the cold climate heat pumps, and starting July 1, Efficiency Vermont is going to have an incentive on the multi-zone or multi-head heat pumps, so 1 unit outside but multiple units inside, as opposed to 1 outside and 1 inside, you know, matched together all the time. So we still have the single zone, and we're going to have the multi-zone. This will be, you can use this for either one. Yep.
When did you say that was?
July 1st. You could do it now, but starting July 1st, Efficiency Vermont's going to have an incentive to help reduce the cost of that system. So, yeah.
Mitsubishi and is it 2?
I believe so.
I think it's anything on their list, and there's a list.
Yeah.
Mitsubishi multi-heads are not on the list yet.
Okay, then probably not.
But wait till July 1st, because you never know. At 12:01, you know, a.m., they might pop it up on the website. So, yeah. And then we've got central pellet heating systems, which these are like the boilers and stuff that do your whole home. They're not the stoves, but they're good systems. They're pretty pricey, but they're very good. And then domestic solar hot water is also covered under this. Some people would consider that a renewable, but because it's not tied to the meter and can't generate, you can't net meter against it, they are looking at it as a thermal, which I totally support. I mean, the more we can say yes to, the better. So that's great. And then health and safety measures, which is really important. Oh, that's fine. Up to 50% of the project cost can be financed. And we're currently working with the Department of Public Service, well, actually the department's the ones really working on it, with a couple other state agencies and stuff on vermiculite and asbestos. Like, how do we handle that? So right now, they're not allowing, and part of it is the lenders too. They have to make sure that they're not getting into a liability situation where they can get sued. So they're hoping to have that worked out. I think the date they set is by August 15th as like a target date. So we've had some already where we've got vermiculite in the attic. We also had one recently with a heating system where the pipes were all wrapped in asbestos, you know, the old system. And so right now they're not allowing that to be financed with heat saver, but the idea is we want to allow it. They just have to figure out the right path to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, so nobody ends up in getting sued, or no contractors end up getting exposed to something dangerous, or people who occupy the property, that kind of thing. So this is the types of properties that both these programs are eligible for. So it's individual homes or units of condos or co-ops, which is great. Include those. Mobile homes, and it can be either on owned land or in a state licensed mobile home park. Hopefully there aren't any mobile home parks out there that aren't licensed. That probably wouldn't be good. So it's pretty much applicable to all the mobile homes. And then you can do it on either primary residences or vacation homes. Now, the one thing I'd say about that, though, with the heat saver, is you do it because the two lenders involved with the heat saver program, one being Opportunities Credit Union, the other VSECU, Vermont State Employees Credit Union, because they're credit unions, you have to be a member, you have to join the credit union. And they're both open to all Vermonters. So if you live in Vermont or you work in Vermont, you can join either one of those credit unions, no problem. But for somebody with a vacation home, if they live in, say, New Jersey, they might not be able to join that credit union, so they might not be able to use the heat saver loan. They could use PACE if they're in a PACE town. So, yep. And then property taxes must be paid by the owner and not delinquent. Cannot be, as we said, I kind of went through this before, but it can't be part of a bankruptcy or pending legal or divorce proceeding, and it can't be owned by a business entity. But other than that, it's pretty much any home that's lived in by the occupant, and you can do so at the top, you might have missed that, but 1 to 4 family units. So that's important for people who own multifamily units. As long as the owner lives in it and it's not more than 4 separate units, they can use both of these.
Mark, did you say the heat saver is not available for people for second homes if their first home is out of state?
No, it is available for second homes, but it might be difficult if the owner lives out of state because they might not be able to join the credit union. And if they can't join either of the credit unions, they wouldn't be able to do it. But there's a lot of Vermonters who have second homes, so for them it's no problem. And there's each of the credit unions has some other little ways you can get in, like if you have a family member, a relative or whatever who's already a member, then you can join, even if you don't live or work in Vermont. So there's ways that it's going to work for a lot of people. But I know like here, you guys are pretty close to the borders, obviously, so you might have, especially if you're a contractor in the room, you might have some customers who live on one of the other sides of the borders here. And so, yep, okay. So we can move on a little bit. So as I just mentioned, the participating lenders, Vermont State Employees Credit Union, as well as Opportunities Credit Union. There's no minimum like there is with PACE. So they can literally do under $1,000 if someone really wanted to. Up to $35,000. So PACE was 30. This is 35. So a little bit more that you can borrow, but for less time. You can only go up to 15 years. I shouldn't say only because that's still pretty good, but at PACE you can go all the way up to 20 years. And then, so you can get, you might, depend on your income, we have 0%. The highest rate for anybody, regardless of your income, is 4.99. So very competitive interest rates, depending on how long you're financing for and what your income is.
So is that below 64,160 regardless of how many residents are in the house? Is that how that
Yes. Yes, really good point. So the department, this is really their program. They came up with this notion, probably 18 months ago, and did an RFP, and of course pulled Efficiency Vermont in for us to kind of program manage it and help design it and launch it and all that. But it really is their program. And so we brought that up with them and said, hey, with PACE, we go off the HUD, what's called area median income, and that's based on how many people live in the house, because that works better for families. But they said, we just want to keep this really simple, because there's a lot, and for good reason, because this was a lot to launch this pilot. I mean, it took quite a lot of work. They don't have a big staff and stuff, so they said, let's just pick some amounts based on it's called the it's MFI, median family income, which is also published by HUD. But anyhow, they said, let's not do a sliding scale, let's just pick a number. So, okay, that's what they did. I prefer to have a sliding scale, but, can't fight every battle. So.
I thought I heard you say something before that this one was tied to your credit score.
This one is, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Are there restrictions on doing work yourself with these loans?
Yeah, so through PACE, you can. There's a path through the Home Performance with Energy Star program. There is a do-it-yourself path, and it tells and they can walk you through it. There's people who work to run that program at Efficiency Vermont who can work with you. They're available over the phone or whatever to walk a person through how exactly that works. And Bob can probably talk about that when he gets up here because he's experienced with that. But there is. I believe, though, I'm pretty positive, for the heat saver, the department said, nope, we want them to go through the Home Performance with Energy Star, and they have to use what's called a EEN member contractor, which is Efficiency Excellence Network. And part of the reason for that is to promote that network and build that network in Vermont, which is, the EEN is a fairly new thing in the last year, 18 months, 2 years, something like that. But the residential side is really built out since last fall, and it's still building out. But what it is, it's a network of contractors that have really been vetted. They have to meet a whole bunch of different criteria in terms of quality and training and all sorts of things like that to make sure that the people in Vermont who work with them then get top-notch contractors. And so because of this program is tied into that, they didn't want to allow the do-it-yourself path for the heat saver loan. So it's not available for that, but it's available through PACE. But you can also, the other thing is, you can use both of these. Like, you could have a heat saver loan and a PACE assessment at the same time. And if you're doing a big, deep retrofit project, you could use, you could play them to your advantage and use PACE where you think that's more applicable, and heat saver on some of the other stuff.
Just in case it doesn't come up later, you can, with the PACE, you can do the do-it-yourself process, but you couldn't use a PACE loan to pay the homeowner to do the work.
For the materials, though.
You can pay for the materials. Yeah. You have to hire a home performance contractor to test in and test out, because you're going to be getting the incentives, so they have to qualify what work you did, basically.
And one mid-project test, too.
And a mid-project test.
Okay. So heat saver is, again, a really simple process. You basically select what type of project you're doing. So say you want to do cold climate heat pumps. You call you would get with a contractor. You can look on the website for Efficiency Vermont or call our customer support people, and they can provide you with all the basically EEN member contractors that do that type of work within like a radius from your home, maybe a 50-mile radius or whatever it is. You can get quotes from as many of them as you want, pick which one you're going to work with. They'll fill out that, there's a form, I've got copies in the back. It's really simple, it's a flyer basically, and on the back is a form, and it's just basically your name, address, phone number, that kind of thing, and then they fill out the same thing on their company, who they are really, and there's just some check boxes on what measures they're doing, and then you take that, sign it, and you contact the lenders, one of those two lenders. You can contact them both even, and actually I kind of encourage people just to send it into both of them. It can't hurt. And then they'll turn that around in less than 2 business days or less, and you're ready to go. No, they'll serve the whole state, but they have 2 offices that you could walk between the branches. So, so it is interesting. I kind of give them a little grief about that too. I'm like, you guys. They're like, well, we have a website, any Vermont. I'm like, well, then you're international. Anyway, no, but they're.
I recently learned something because I'm with River Valley Credit Union, and I realized that the credit unions, some or all of them are sharing ATMs. So I can go to the VSCCU ATM in the pharmacy and do banking with River Valley. So that's just kind of another kind of benefit.
It is. Credit unions are great that way. Banks don't play well together. We've come to learn that. That's why we don't have any financing programs that have multiple banks involved. But we do have ones that have multiple credit unions, and we hope to have more credit unions in the future, but they do work well together. And there's other things like that they do, so it's great. But yeah, Opportunity serves the whole state, but they're actual physical locations. One's in Burlington, Old North End, and the other one's in Winooski. Whereas VSCCU is, a lot more statewide for sure. Much bigger organization. They have over 60,000 members at VSCCU. Yep.
So if someone has more than one property, can they do more than one project in multiple buildings?
Yes. One would be your second home, and one would be your primary residence. Right? Because you can't actually live in both full time, but because we allow second homes, yes. If you had to hit a cottage on a little lake or something like that, or hunting place or something, yep, you could do them both.
Are there any opportunities for commercial businesses?
Not under these 2 programs, but I've got 2 other things that we do have for that I could show you afterwards. Yep. Okay.
Mark, this question.
Yeah.
Piggybacking on Jason, again, to the landlord situation with units. Anything that How does this fit?
Well, these two, it has to be owner occupied, and it can't be more than 4 units. So if you're the owner and you're living in one of the units, it would fit. Either one of these could fit. But if it's not, if it's a separate property that you just own and has apartments in it, then these two don't work for that. We could look at, those business energy loans because it is a business, right?
Absolutely.
So we could look at that for sure. And then, depending if those work, great. And if not, though, we can help you try to find a good lender that, might be able to work with you, a private lender. I do highly recommend that people look. There's a lot of good ones. I mean, and more of the banks and credit unions, especially the local ones in Vermont, the smaller ones, have some really great programs. The bigger ones might, but seems like the smaller ones are the ones leading the way. But like I know National Bank of Middlebury has a green loan program that's really favorable. I think it's 2.875% interest. Credit Union of Vermont in Rutland, which anybody who works for like the government, like post office or other types of state employees as well. There's some eligibility criteria to join it, but they've got a really good program. It's on their website. They've got really good interest rates. They'll re-amortize the loan when you get your solar credit. If you're doing rooftop PV and you get your big tax credit back. And so will VSECU with their V-Green. That's probably the leading private program in the state is V-Green through VSECU. They're a partner on the Heat Saver as well. They're fantastic for everybody, business, farms, residential, anything. But there's others. I'm not trying to just plug certain ones. Those are the ones that are just kind of coming to mind right away, but there's plenty of good lenders out there.
There's a list you can actually download from the Efficiency Vermont website of a number of different banks, credit unions throughout the state that have energy lending programs.
Yeah.
Mark, I'll probably be having a GC do some major sort of deconstruction of work, and that would include wet weatherization. How much of that could be included under the Heat Saver program?
Probably up to 50% of your project costs, but being $35,000 being the maximum that you can finance under it, so 50% of that. But we can look at it specifically to see how if it really is health and safety measures, or if it's not so much health and safety, but it's just part of the work. Then, yeah. So it's something we need to look at because those are a little bit gray areas, And I try to always, again, my mantra is always try to say yes. So when it comes to the gray areas, I usually am the one who gets the calls, and if it's really difficult to decide if I should say yes or no, then I'll call the department and flip it over to them to debate. And they're good about getting back to us really fast too. But generally we'll look at it and, if we can say, well, it's not really a health and safety thing. It's like sometimes they'll have to cut an access, right, to get into, like, say, a roof area to do the insulation. There just is no access. They have to cut one open. And then at the end, they have to, of course, patch that back up, make it so no one can tell, right? So that's not really health and safety. So we can call that project cost. And then you're not subject to the 50%. You can save that 50% for real health and safety, like mold repair or stuff like that. So, but stuff I can help work with you on. You can always call me anytime at work, and I can go through it, and we'll see if we can get it done. So,
Mark, you say department, I assume we're referring to the Department of Public Service.
yeah, I am. I'm sorry. Did I say it? But okay, I try to usually say it all the way out, but sorry about that. Yeah, Department of Public Service.
There's a question here.
Did you say, or did I miss, is the Heat Saver also qualified as tax deductible?
It depends on so they have both secured and unsecured under that, and depending on the size of your project and how long you go for, you might fall into one or the other. There isn't a clear delineation because it could vary depending on which credit union you use. So I can't say where that delineation is, but so if it's unsecured, then no, that's more like a personal loan. Right. But if it's the secured option, that's really the same as like a second mortgage at that point, so it would be. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are asking these questions because these are great to get that information out there to everybody. So, anything else? Okay, I'll turn it over to Bob. And again, I
think Bruce is going to go next.
Or Bruce is going to go next, okay.
And then I'll jump in.
Perfect.
Bruce, did you have slides or no?
I didn't have slides, no.
So maybe, can we turn the lights on?
Thank you, Mark.
And it's dark enough outside. We're going to come back to those same slides in a minute. so don't go away.
Just go to sleep.
Yeah.
All right, I know we're running over, and I promised to be brief, and I learned something today. I didn't know that the heat saver could go up to 50% of the health and safety issues with the home, so that's great. That's good news for me. I'm Bruce Whitney. I work for Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. We have a program called a home repair program that focuses on health and safety issues for income qualified homeowners in the Wyndham and Windsor County areas. And we can also do weatherization work, but we're really excited to be partnering with the Heat Saver and the PACE in PACE towns, because oftentimes by the time you add up all your health and safety issues, you don't have a lot of money left over for weatherization, and we want to make sure people do them both. So that's what I'm here to tell you a little bit about, is that we are available to do those health and safety issues. Anything that could affect your health, and roofing, plumbing, electrical, septic. Oftentimes you got to make some repairs to your home before you can do weatherization, because you can't weatherize a leaking roof. That doesn't get you anywhere. Can't put a solar panel on a leaking roof. It's not going to get you anywhere. So we can help with that. Our income guidelines are the 80% median income for the counties that we're in, so they're going to be a little bit different than that chart. Just to give you a ballpark here, for a 3-person family in Windsor County, that's $47,000. And again, you can call us. We'll go through it. We'll help you. Let us know you're working with Heat Saver or PACE, and we'll be sure to work with Mark or whomever. And the phone number to call is on these brochures, and I've got a couple or a few back there, and I'll leave a few up here.
Vermiculite? Asbestos?
No, we're in that same, we're looking forward to being able to say yes, but in that same zone, yeah. Yep.
It's a tough one for a lot of people.
It's a tough one, right.
A lot of people. There's like, what, 20,000 homes or so in Vermont with vermiculite in the attics, they think?
So,
at least.
One thing regarding vermiculite in homes, there's a new trust based on a big bankruptcy lawsuit. The Zonolite Attic Insulation Trust is got money towards people who have vermiculite in their homes or in their businesses, I believe, for up to 55% of the cost of removing and re-insulating if you have qualified vermiculite insulation. 55% of, I believe, $7,000. So it's a little more than a little more, close to $4,000 available, and that's a fairly simple process to get it tested and everything like that, but it could take a couple of months to get that.
So it has to test positive?
It has to be proven to have been zonolite insulation, and they have ways of testing it, but also they'll take as proof if you have a zonolite brand bag up in the attic or something like that. They'll be able, you can get
Go
it.
on to eBay and look.
If you
Copy to your neighbor.
If you have a bag, you can make a lot of money. Expose yourself to that zonolite bag sent to you in the mail. Go ahead and defraud them. Sure.
How do you spell zonolite?
ZONO.
We'll see.
Yep. Yeah, and if anyone has more questions, they can talk to me about that later.
Great, thanks. So I think we'll try to leave the lights on, and if you can't see, let me know and we'll turn them off again, but it's getting kind of dark now. So I'm Bob Walker again with Sustainable Energy Resource Group. So I'm just going to go quickly through some of the different programs that, because Mark's touched on them, so I have a sense with the audience here, a bunch of this anyhow, but So we're just going to talk about the different programs and that can be used with this financing.
Should be is it a slideshow?
Get to it. I think it's one of these up here, but I'm not a PC person, so I couldn't.
Oh, I might be able to.
Bottom left.
Bottom left? Bottom right. Bottom right. I was going to point at the screen, but you can't see it. Down here, the one, oh, right here. That one. Yep. There you go. Hey.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, next one. Okay, so one of the programs that you can do is Home Performance with Energy Star. It's a home energy audit and weatherization program. It's run through Efficiency Vermont. They provide up to $2,000 incentives towards the work that's done, and they provide a $100 discount on the initial test-in audits. There are certified, trained contractors that are BPI certified, the Building Performance Institute certified, and so you can use both of these programs for that. Next. So typical costs and savings on a home performance job can vary widely depending upon how much work you want to do, how good or bad the home is, and how deep you want to go. But, you know, in looking at a lot of jobs, Efficiency Vermont has said that, you know, a typical job costs about $7,500, and on that kind of a job, you'd get about $1,200 worth of incentives, so the net cost of the homeowner would be $6,300, and for that deep of work, typical savings might be in the range of 15 to 30% of your energy bill, which would be maybe around $750. So looking at those numbers, you end up with $750. Takes you about 8.4 years to save the $6,300 that you invested initially, and that would be like a 12% rate of return on investment. So it's, again, as Mark said before, it's a pretty good return on the money you've invested, and you can finance it. If you're financing it at 0 to 1.99 and you're making 12% on it, it's a pretty good deal. I would go for it if you have that kind of job to do. Next. Cold climate heat pumps. Is there anybody that isn't familiar with cold climate heat pumps? So basically, you know, they're a great way to heat your home using electricity. They capture the heat from the outside, and they can heat and cool at about half the cost of oil and propane. Next. And Efficiency Vermont does provide a discount of $300 to $400 on those units. That's at the wholesale level, so you don't have to apply for that discount. It's already there. And as Mark said, up to now they have been doing just the single outside and single inside units, but starting in July 1st, they're going to be also incentivizing the multi-zone, multi-inside zone systems as well.
What's the typical
Cost of those, about $4,000 for a single head system. You know, like a single, so if you could go back to that picture. So what it is this is the outside unit, and the way it used to be is basically for each of the inside units, and they're about 3 feet wide by this, and they usually go on the top of the wall, these guys, and they blow the heat and or cold out into the home. And this sits outside and it pulls the air through it, and it sucks the heat out of it and puts it into this through a freon loop, basically, or a coolant loop. It used to be for each one of these inside, you had to have one of these outside, and the combo would be about $4,000. Now you can use a single one of these and have up to, I don't know, 5 or 6 something inside, ultimately. I mean, you have to size this appropriately for each of those to work effectively inside.
And it blows the air in one spot.
Yeah. So there are, you know, certain situations where they work better than others. They work better in open floor plans. They work better not in really spread out ranch type situations unless you have multi-heating systems. And they probably work better in a home that's not super cold, that's somewhat efficient. I mean, it's always, in my mind, makes sense to do your efficiency work first, lower your heating needs, and then do the...
I'm sorry, so one of those now will power up how many of those?
5 or 6, I think, inside. But you have...
on the size of the outside.
Yeah, you have to size the outside. You have to get bigger outside unit in order to do multiple inside units.
And is everyone's where they also cool some?
Yes, so they'll work as an air conditioner as well.
And they wash the dishes too.
Yeah, and they're much more efficient both at heating and cooling than let's say the standalone in the window air conditioners or a radiant electric heater. They work 2 to 3, 4 times as much as efficient as a radiant electric heater. Yes.
Are these, or is there something like this that can be used to retrofit a forced air system in the house? You've already got ductwork.
They do have heat pumps that can go into forced hot air systems. It wouldn't be this one. They have different heat pumps that are they would have a bigger kind of outside unit like this, and they can be ducted into a heating and a forced air system. Yes.
Are they also
incentivized? I don't know that they are. Do you know, Mark? I'm not sure.
We're only doing the ductless.
I think it's just the ductless, yeah. Okay. Another similar kind of technology for heating hot water is called a heat pump water heater. And it basically extracts heat out of the air around it, and you typically will put these heat pump water heaters in the basement. So they'll take heat out of the basement air and heat your hot water. Now again, there's a couple of limitations on that. You don't want to put them in an area that's below 50 degrees because and on those heat pump air heaters, they've been in use for years and years in the South where it's more moderate climates. What's new about them is that they've gotten much more efficient to where they actually work efficiently down to about 15 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit in this climate. And so they're now calling them cold climate heat pumps. So these guys, the heat pump water heaters, you want to have an ambient room temperature of about 50 degrees or higher for them to work effectively. They also make a little bit of noise, so they recommend putting them in a basement as opposed to like the living quarters of your room.
It is pretty noisy.
You have them?
They're pretty noisy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They also vary. Different units are much noisier than others.
It also acts as a dehumidifier. So if you have a dehumidifier running in your basement in the summer, you actually can save some electricity costs.
They're more efficient than the dehumidifiers, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My dehumidifier's not really running.
At the same time.
How many gallons?
I've had, a house full of 6 people, dishwasher going. I thought I would have run out of water. I was really hesitant, but I haven't. And I have, 2 sons and guests. And
It's not on the
It's not
It's a tank.
It's a tank.
It's a 50-gallon thing. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if they make real small units. I'm not sure.
Well, I have a personal thing with the plumbing code because I have supplied 30-gallon hot water heaters to 9 or 10 units since the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has ever run out of hot water. But I'm now required by the law, apparently, to put in 50 gallons with...
For rentals?
Well, yes, I guess you could. But, we're up against climate change.
I know. Yeah.
Why would I have 20 gallons sitting, being heated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One other thing before I forget about the air source heat pumps is generally they're pretty quiet, especially the inside units. The outside units are relatively quiet, but it is important how and where you situate that compressor, because I've heard of situations where they have screwed it onto the side of the house and there's some vibration in the machine that will go through your wall, and you can hear it on the inside. And they do have some retrofits for that. They have some like rubber washer gasket kind of things to help buffer that. But it's probably better, if you can, to put it on a freestanding pedestal. You do want a couple things. You want to have it covered over so like snow and rain and things aren't falling on it. And you want to have it raised a little bit off the ground so snow doesn't build up into it.
Bob, I've heard that those mini splits, the replacement cost in the controller can be exorbitant. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard about that. I don't know.
So you said 15 below zero.
Mm-hmm.
We had at least 6 nights below 15 below zero.
Yeah, they're.
What's up with that?
Well, they're not recommending them necessarily. I mean, if you have a super efficient home, there are people who are using them as sole source heaters. But they're recommending them mostly as displacing and having a backup heating system. So, it would be in a home where you've already got an existing heating system and looking at displacing maybe 80% of the heat that the heating that you're currently using. You can use them in a very efficient home as a sole source, but it's got to be a really good house if you're going to feel comfortable and
there is
sure you can get by there.
I think just around the corner here, though, it won't be an issue. I read something, and it was already like last August or September, and I think they said in like a year or so they would have it on market. But basically, it's like a supercharger that goes in line in those things, and they can run then all efficiently down to something like minus 60 or 70 Fahrenheit. So it really would be it wouldn't matter in Vermont anymore after that because it never gets that cold. It's aircraft technology. They already use the same technology in aircraft, I think, for propeller planes to keep anyways, but so there's a company that's working on it, and it sounds like they're going to not only have them in the new units, but they're going to probably come out with a retrofit so people who already have bought heat pumps could just add that into their system, and then they'll be efficient down to, like I said, 50 or 60 below zero. And then they can truly be sole sourced unless the power goes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So you still need to have a wood stove or something.
This is true for oil or
anything else.
Yeah. So they rate one of the ways that they rate the heat pumps is a coefficient of efficiency. It's like for every 1 unit of electricity that you put in, how many units of electricity or heating capacity do you get out? And typically they're 200 to 300% efficient, which sounds weird, but it means that they're heating 2 to 3 times more efficient than a resistance heater, which is a coefficient of 1, basically. But they say the theoretical coefficient of efficiency of them is like 8 or so. So they're much better than they used to be, but they're still making great progress on the efficiency of them as time goes. Next. So the heat pump water heaters, that's kind of what they look like. And Efficiency Vermont has an incentive of $550 on them. Typical cost is about $1,000, so the net cost for the unit, not the installation, but the unit itself is about $450. And Efficiency Vermont figures a family of 4 using about $490 a year for hot water would save $4,000 over the lifetime of the unit by switching to one of these.
That cost is for one of the smaller models, by the way.
50 gallon?
40 to 50 gallon, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next. And Mark mentioned that another thing that you can use these financing programs for is central pellet heating systems, and they are really cool. I've gone to see these in action, and you never touch the fuel. It's like a liquid fuel. The pellets are delivered in a truck, and they're blown into a hopper, typically in the basement. They can be outside the house too. And then from the hopper, they either go by like an auger system or a vacuum tube into the furnace or boiler and heat the home. Part of the, I don't think that's for the heat. Yeah, it is for the, I think for one of the criteria to use PACE, I know one of the criteria for getting the incentives, which actually goes, let's go to the next page. There are a couple of different incentives, $2,000 from Efficiency Vermont and $2,000 from the Clean Energy Development Fund, two separate incentive programs, and you can get both of them if the efficiency of your central pellet system is high enough. So you could get up to $4,000 incentive per unit. But one of the criteria on it is it has to be an automatically fed system, and it has to have at least a week's worth of pellet storage. So they want it to be a hands-free, you just, it'll take care of the house on its own type system. There's also a high-performance adder. So that means if the unit is up to a certain efficiency rating, they'll give you another $500. And also there's an efficiency adder, so you can use $350 towards the cost of an audit or doing efficiency improvements. If you were to, you'd get another $350 if you were to buy one of these. Next.
Bob,
yeah.
An issue was raised in the New York State Legislature for indoor pellet storage about the pellets actually releasing carbon monoxide. Have you heard anything about this?
No. No? It's interesting.
I haven't, but Adam Sherman at VEIC, who runs the Burke,
right?
He could probably,
that would be
if you want to talk to someone, he would be the person.
I was just wondering if either of you had heard anything about that.
I hadn't, but yeah.
So it's
I don't know if it's real or not. It raises an issue, and
yeah,
so my
that's an interesting question. Yeah. Yeah. Window and door upgrades or replacements, you can use the PACE and Heat Saver loan programs for those. Next. And then here's a bunch of other things. Energy Star or equivalent boiler or furnace. Tier 3 ground source heat pumps. Natural gas or propane water heaters. Heat or energy recovery ventilating systems, exhaust-only ventilating systems, central AC if they meet certain efficiency requirements, solar hot water, level 1 and 2 electric vehicle charging stations, and as Mark mentioned, required heating, health and safety measures.
Tier 3 ground source heat pumps would be what, the most advanced kind, or something else?
I believe those are the more efficient.
Yeah, and those are just under PACE.
That's just under PACE.
Yeah, some of these measures are only under PACE. The one thing about the Heat Saver, where we don't list all the measures, like we don't list heat pump water heaters, but in your energy audit, if you're doing the Home Performance and Energy Star program, if the auditor recommends one of those, then it's absolutely eligible. So anything in that audit report that they recommend, so like a smart thermostat, on-demand water heater if they recommend that, because maybe the heat pump one doesn't work in your situation. Anything in that audit report that's legitimate, which it will be, like they're not going to say granite countertops or, you know what I mean, so is eligible. But we don't call those out specifically because it's just would be a lot to be calling out individually, and we try to keep it pretty simple on that program. So.
Next.
One more question.
Sure, I'm sorry.
So I had an energy audit done. And I'm trying to figure out, I can have things done with these programs besides what they recommended, right? Or is it only things they recommended?
It depends on, if it's something that's already eligible under the program, you can do it.
Okay.
And specifically, especially with the Heat Saver, if it's something they recommend, you can do it.
Right.
But
so,
like for instance,
one thing that they wouldn't usually recommend on a home performance thing would be, let's say, new windows.
that's what I'm talking
Right.
about. And I specifically asked him, I said, my windows are awful. I had just put plastic on them. He did the blower door test, and of course, the windows aren't taken into account very well because I just sealed them up.
Right.
And I'm like, I really want to work on my windows, so I'm not sure how to, fit that in there.
I think that you can do new efficient windows even if they're not written up into your home performance contract, I believe, as long as they're relatively efficient windows, but Mark might know more.
I'd have to look into it, but it seems like there'd be a way we could get the auditor to go back and like maybe redo his report and add those.
Are the windows the triple pane?
I don't know that there's, are there restrictions or guidelines?
There are guidelines, but I honestly don't have them with me, or unless it's in some of that literature. There's some pretty in-depth stuff back there that might be in there. We have all that. Like, you know, tomorrow, for example, somebody could call and the people who run that program could walk you through it. They can pull up the information on exactly what the criteria are. I know they have to be pretty, like Bob said, they have to be pretty good. You know, with anything that we back or recommend people do, it has to be kind of in the top-notch kind of range there in terms of performance. But there definitely are windows that are allowed under that.
And typically the home performance won't recommend replacing windows because there are pretty much more cost-effective ways generally to make windows perform better. And
Been through that, yeah.
Right. So, and the Department of Public Service basically restricts the home performance incentives to kind of the more cost-effective improvements. And windows just don't score there. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to change them.
Windows probably would, but, you know.
Typically, they don't. And I can, you know, I didn't mention this. If anybody wants to, after, I've got a suitcase of goodies back there that I love to show and tell of different things you can do with your home, including some different window improvements in case they end up not being able to pay for your windows and you need to weatherize them. We have a little handout on weatherizing, and I have some cool things to show on that. Next. PACE can be used for renewables, but not at the low income qualifying rates. Only that what's now 6.35% and changes monthly rate can be used for electric renewables. I mean, there are the solar hot water and the pellet systems, which are, I would qualify as renewables, but they're thermal renewables, and you can use the income qualifying lower interest rates for all those other things. It's just the electric renewables that don't qualify for those rates. Next. And that's contact information for Surge and Efficiency Vermont. And that's all I have prepared, and I'd happy to answer questions or talk with you individually afterwards. And I'm sure Mark or Bruce would be happy to answer more questions now or after as well. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
Last words?
Are there any more questions for anyone? I really want to thank Mark and Bob for coming down and taking the time to share this information with us. This is great. And I hope you all will go out and spread the word about this, because this is a great opportunity, I think, for people in Brattleboro and surrounding towns as well. And before we end, I just want to make a quick announcement. This Saturday is the Celebrate Solar tours going on around the state. And these are tours of interesting solar arrays, mostly commercial, some homes. And there's 4 sites in Brattleboro that are going to be open. In the morning, the Sovereign Solar Community Solar Farm is going to be open for touring. That's located behind the high school at 8 University Way from 9 to 12. That'll be open to tour. And then from 12 to 3, there's a home that's a Parker residence, 46 Fairground Road, that has solar PV, solar hot water, and geothermal, and it's actually for sale. So if you're interested in a really green home, that's a great opportunity to tour it. And that's going to be from 12 to 3 p.m. Again, that's 46 Fairground Road. And ISA Solar will be there with food and entertainment, lots of interesting stuff. The other two sites are the Sunnyside Solar Store, which is going to be open all day. That's next to the Chelsea Royal Diner in West Brattleboro. And also Omega Optical is going to be having tours of their array just off Route 5 going towards Guilford. So thank you all for coming, and have a great evening.
Thank you.